The idea of dropping your lives and starting over abroad has a lot of appeal to many Americans. Whether running from debt, responsibilities, or even a crazy ex, packing up and jetting over to the pond in Europe may feel like a logical next step in life. Europe has a crazy amount of history, diversity, and places to visit, but we're here to pump the brakes on that a bit. The grass might seem greener on the other side, but there's really a lot of undesirables that come with European living. And today, we're going to be looking at the top 10 reasons not to move to Europe. Number 10, high taxes. One of the worst parts of being an adult in the US is paying taxes. Well, you better get used to paying even more taxes if you're considering moving to Europe. Some countries' tax rates extend well above 40% of your total income, meaning that just about half the money or more that you end up making in your lifetime will all go to the government and you'll never see a penny. Sounds great, right? Yeah, sure. Now, you might be thinking that the public services provided then justify the high tax rate. And yeah, while there is a small grain of truth to that, the overall taxation experienced by European citizens is, well, let's just say questionable at best. Number 9, the language barrier. With all the diversity that exists in Europe, you're going to have a bit of a learning curve when attempting to communicate with your new neighbors. It can be quite difficult to travel the continent without having a few languages in your back pocket to get you through. Contrary to what Hollywood might portray, there isn't a wealth of people in Europe who just so happen to speak English well enough to make your life easier. The great thing about living in the United States is that the worst thing that you might come across is an incomprehensible Southern drawl, a really thick New York accent, but even then, you can probably figure out what's being said. Not so much so if you're living your life abroad. Number 8, the weather. In short, the weather in Europe is god-awful. There is obvious variances across the entire continent, but just try and get used to the cold and rainy if you plan on establishing residency in the old world. You are going to be able to find some decent spots near the Mediterranean, but due to the geographic location and distance from the equator, you'll need to make sure that you have a nice selection of jackets and jumpers. Number 7, everybody smokes. Maybe you're a smoker and this one doesn't bother you so much, but while most of Europe is pretty health conscious, cigarette smoking still remains the outlier as most people smoke here, and it's virtually impossible to find any accommodations that are smoke-free, whether we're talking hotels, rental cars, or even various apartments and homes themselves. I hope you're prepared to smell like ashtray for the rest of your life if you end up taking residency. Number 6, government bureaucracy. Bureaucracy. Just the name itself sounds like a dirty word. Bureaucracy is alive and thriving in Europe. That's not to say that the United States doesn't have its fair share too, but man, it is on a whole other level in Europe. With the European Union as strong as it ever is amongst Brexit, the state sees itself as far more important than the citizen, and citizens around Europe have recently been expressing their disdain for their subpar leaders and weak governments. The handling of the coronavirus pandemic has only shown just how poor the leadership is amongst several of the countries. Number 5, the learning curve. Moving to another part of the world does come with its fair share of frustrations. By uprooting your life and moving to Europe, you're going to need to relearn just about everything you have come to become familiar with. Roadways, maps, storefronts, standard hours of operation, all of these things that we take for granted in the States will have their own nuances and features that will take a tremendous time to relearn. If you move to an area such as Ireland, where they drive on the opposite side of the road, and you'll be hard-pressed to find an affordable automatic vehicle, then you're going to be experiencing immediate culture shock. You need to learn new terminology and lingo to truly fit in, and still, you may continue to be looked at as a foreigner who doesn't really belong, even after living there for years. Number 4, the high cost of living. You may think that there's no way the cost of living can be greater than in a state like New York, but data does show that the average cost of living in Europe tends to be higher than in the US. This is especially true in northern countries like Iceland and Norway, but the average remains fairly similar to that of a city like Boston throughout Western Europe. The cost does go down as you head east towards Poland, Lithuania, and Russia, but anyone who has ever seen the movie Hostel knows exactly why you'd never want to move there anyway. All kidding aside, it is possible to move to Europe and enjoy a low cost of living, but you will also experience a lower standard of living that you may well come to regret. Number 3, it's old. Everything is old. The buildings, the roadways, the plumbing, the hospitals, the electricity. And don't get me wrong, it is really cool and nifty to see and visit some of these older architectural structures, but it's an entirely different ballgame when you are relying on it to deliver water to your flat. One of the beautiful parts of the United States is the constant renovation that's going on in cities, while the charm of the old world suddenly disappears when you realize that you're unable to get enough water pressure to take a proper shower. Personally, I fully appreciate the high standards of living in the US, and it would take a whole lot more than seeing a few castles and clock towers to change my mind. Number 2, there's no room for entertainment. Sure, you can go see a play or maybe head to a swanky museum, but believe it or not, most European nations source their most popular music, films, and television shows from the United States. If you're in a non-English speaking country, you're going to find out real quick that a lot of the TV shows are basically just American ones with poorly done dubbing. The music that is available in these countries is also mainly what is available in America, so you won't really be immersing yourself in an entirely different cultural experience, however you may have envisioned that. Lastly, number 1, it's not the United States. Look, what else can I say here? The United States is the greatest country on earth for so many reasons. There's the culture, standard of living, and of course the opportunity that's provided across the entire country. There just isn't another place on earth that can offer up as much of an experience as America. There was a reason that our founding fathers declared independence from the tyrannical Brits, and the reason is called freedom, baby. The United States has had such a wonderful benefit of studying centuries of what has worked and what hasn't across the continent of Europe, and ended up incorporating most of the positives into a large, united society. What more could we ask for that you can't get somewhere else? And just like that, those are the top 10 reasons not to move to Europe.